Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am excited to finally put this out there. I know I've been working on this for a few days. I've literally spent probably like 10 hours on this video here. I finally understand where you're coming from. It hit me like a ton of bricks, and I understand why there's so much resistance to the idea of when I say couples work. So it's like the misunderstanding was massive, massive misunderstanding. So I want to share with you what I mean when I've been referring to these things and how this can help you. Because I literally believe you. I believe that this can literally save you 12 months of pain and suffering and heartache if we can come together in terms of like understanding what I'm trying to convey has not come across yet. So I figured out finally why that's the case based on all of your feedback, and I really, really appreciate it because I want this message to come across. So I'm going to go over a couple of things here. Number one, very excited. Number two, as a little joke, I feel like this is often the case when people hear about couples work or EFT, right? Nuclear explosion, what's going on? Whose fault is this? EFT, right? It's couples work's fault. And this is something that I want to clarify because when I say couples work, I'm not referring to what is traditional couples work because that doesn't work in your situation oftentimes, especially early on. There's a different kind of an approach that I want to share with you that really does work earlier on, and it can speed up the process for you. So another part of the reasons why I think this like idea of EFT or couples work can be like this, like, I don't know, this fun little cartoon is that this has happened for some of you. It's so sad for me to see a couple of the comments that said, I did an EFT session. I went there once and it was like a nightmare. I will never do that again. I'm like I feel bad because I know what the potential of this is. And so I did a little research to figure out how many EFT therapists or how many certified EFT therapists are there in the state of Nevada and Utah. So Nevada, I'm one of 3 certified EFT therapists, like out of hundreds of therapists. In Utah, there are 11. So between the 2 states and the thousands of therapists, there are 14 of us that are certified in this approach. And I can't speak to anybody else, but I don't know of anybody else who specializes in this who's also certified. There might be 1 or 2, but like, again, for you to have gone to an EFT session, if you don't have a solid understanding of EFT, and if you do not have a solid trauma and addiction background, yes, this can absolutely happen, and I'm sad to see that it has for some of you. So I want to clarify a bit about how this applies to your situation and how you can use it to leverage and how you can leverage this to help the process move along more fast, more quickly, more effectively. And again, I'm really excited now that I have this understanding as to why things got stuck. So overall, just to quickly run through this, this doesn't apply for everybody. So this is a part of, I think, where people get stuck as well. I talk about couples work and people who are not in a situation where their marriage is even possible to work on. They push back against on that, and naturally so. So this is not for everybody. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, who is this for? So this is for people who are in relationships where pornography has created hurt and pain. If there's been betrayal and and trust being damaged, couples who want to improve their marriage. This is even for couples. The information that I'm going to share with you today is for couples when the addiction is actually still active and there are current slips happening. Of course, this is all on varying degrees, and some acting out of is obviously much more severe and frequent. I'm going to show you how this still can apply for you. And this is also for marriages when there's defensiveness, blame, victim mentality, lies, justification, right? The traditional, people call it addict mode, right? This information is for you. This is why I want to help you, because this is so often where people are stuck and they don't have the tools necessary to move through it. And this is also for couples where husbands are months or years sober. So across the board, there's many different areas in which this can help. Who is this not for? So this is key. This is not for couples whose husbands are against working recovery and who do not admit there's a problem. And this is also for women who are not interested in having the marriage repaired and want to divorce. I can't emphasize this bullet point number 1. Massive, massive area where people get stuck. If the husband is not willing to do any work, you can't do couples work. It just doesn't work. If they're not willing to admit there's a problem and be willing to work on their recovery, then it's not going to work. The main precursor to this particular form of treatment that I'm going to share again today is he willing to work? Does he see that there's a problem? And is he willing to move forward? There can even be slips happening, like I said, because there's a huge difference between somebody who slips and is not and doesn't care, like, oh well, this is me and accept me, or too bad. Like, that doesn't work for that kind of a man. But somebody who slips and struggles and wants to overcome this, and who's humble, and who's trying to figure out what's going on and in recovery process. And even if the motivation wanes, right? Even if the motivation isn't consistent, even if they're not perfect in their recovery efforts or perfectly consistent, this is the process that can help. So again, the attitude is the major factor of the process. When the attitude's good or willing, we can do it. If he's not willing to do any recovery work, please, this is not for you. I think this presentation will still be helpful for you. So if your husband does get jump started into doing this process, into doing recovery work, then beautiful, because then you can use this. Briefly, I just met with a couple days ago. He had been half-heartedly trying to stop the process, right? In and out. I don't know. He just wasn't really willing. He wasn't willing. Not that he wasn't really willing. Like, he was not willing to give it up. And so what the wife did was, which I thought was brilliant, like, set a solid boundary. If this continues to happen, I'm leaving. If you're not going to work on this and overcome this, I'm leaving. So that was the motivation to jumpstart him into, like, I got to get this figured out. And so all of a sudden he's willing. And so EFT is not, like, EFT empowers women. EFT empowers people to set boundaries, to get their voice back. Like, I want people to set boundaries. I want people to do their individual work. One of the fastest ways to kickstart the husband's moving down the path is to set a boundary. And it's so crucial, because sometimes boundaries, if they're not held firm, they can just keep pushing. But if the boundary is firm, it's like, this is it. I'm not doing this anymore. Many times guys are like, they wake up and say, I got to get this figured out. So, okay, this is for people who are willing, okay? Number 2, I guess, so EFT. The question is, what is EFT? How soon should I use it? Is EFT couples work? How can this apply to me? How does this help my relationship? So, emotionally focused therapy is the fastest, most effective research-based approach that we have. It has a 90% improvement rate and a 70% cure rate, which is phenomenal. I can't tell you how impressive those numbers are, right? In this field of therapy, that no other approach comes near to that. And those studies that they've done, they haven't done like a full-scale study with addiction. And so I'm sure the numbers of like improvement rate are not going to be as high as 90%, but I can guarantee you they will be higher. These numbers in EFT will be higher than any other form of couple therapy. And by the time we finish this video, I think you'll know why. So when I say EFT, this is where I think the misunderstanding takes place. I say EFT, the picture in my head looks very different than the picture in your head. When I say EFT, I'm talking about stage 1. There's 2 stages of EFT. Number 1 is him learning how to be vulnerable with you and him creating safety. The miss that I think has happened is that when I say EFT and do couples work early, many of the women who hear this, or men even for that case, hear me suggesting that they do stage 2 work, which is deep emotional connecting, deep intimacy, a sense of bonding, reaching for reassurance, risking, being like completely in that phase. And that is not at all what I'm suggesting. That, I think, is where the miss is. I'm not saying that. And I could see, without me clarifying, when I first said that EFT is important and do it early, or this particular, again, when I say, again, I want to use EFT, the synonym for EFT in this presentation, I'm going to shift to using this language, him learning how to be vulnerable with you. So when I tell you in a couple's context, him learning how to be vulnerable with you, like, that is crucial. But if you hear, even if I say do EFT, do couples work, and you hear me say it gets perceived as do deep emotional work and be there for your husband, I could understand and completely appreciate why you would resist that and push back against that, as you should. This stage 2 work is not something you should be doing if there's no safety. It's impossible. And if you try, you're going to get traumatized. So when I'm referring to EFT and doing couples work early, please again understand I'm referring to stage 1 work, which is him learning how to be vulnerable with you, which creates safety. Vulnerability is key. So the question then is, how soon should I do that? Then the question I would ask back to you is, how soon do you want him to learn that skill? And I think for most women, they'd say like right now or yesterday. I would want him to have had this skill yesterday. not 18 months into the process. Again, going back to stage 2 work, I could see that being the case. Like we wait, we're not going to touch that. We're not going to even, I can't even think about opening up. I just feel so betrayed. I'm not going to even begin to be there for you emotionally. I can't. That's like, again, when you talk about stage 2 work, that is not the beginning of the process. So how soon do you want him to learn this idea, this skill of being vulnerable? Immediately. For most people, it's immediately. Some of you might have concerns about being a punching bag. If he has to learn how to be vulnerable, what does that mean for you? So I'm going to discuss that. And Brené Brown talks a lot about how addiction is fueled by shame. And we know that's true, right? We know the research that is true. And shame is healed by connection. So essentially, again, when I talk about this idea of addictions can be healed through connection, that is true. However, when I say that, again, many people hear stage 2 work, but really what I'm referring to is that, or I guess to speak a little bit more about this, many women hear, okay, if addiction is healed through connection and I'm not connecting with him, I'm responsible for him acting out. I'm responsible for propping him up and meeting his needs and doing his recovery work for him. And I'm responsible because he continues to act out and I'm not connecting with him. And so I've gotten posts over the last few days that have knocked me over the head with that. And again, this is why I'm clarifying. That is not at all what I'm saying. Addictions, yes, can be healed through connection, but we do not jump straight into that connection, that stage 2 piece, until there's safety. And the process of him learning how to be vulnerable helps with the addiction. And again, that's going to make a little more sense in a little bit. Quick scenery change. I had to come back home before I could finish the video. Okay, so I wanted to share with you again this idea that when I went to, so after learning about how this process works, I was completely floored. Like, honestly, it's life-changing. It changed my life personally. I use these same principles in my own marriage and with all the people that I work with. And so when I went to this EFT training, this is part of where I learned, this is the place where I learned about how important connection is. And so one of the things they talked about was that we're hardwired for it. And there's all these positive benefits, right? Higher self-esteem, increased resilience, stronger immune system. We recover faster from illnesses, can cope better with stress and trauma. We can deal more effectively with strong emotions and impulses. It just shapes our brain in such a positive and healing way. And the opposite is also true. Connection is the connection and love are the oxygen to our soul. And when we don't have that, we get increased levels of stress, increased levels of depression and anxiety. Loneliness, this is so important. I thought when this study came out, loneliness is equal to 15 cigarettes per day. That's the emotional and physical toll it takes on somebody. Or that's the weight or the emotional weight that it causes somebody. And again, just physical health concerns as well, high blood pressure, obesity. And so after I learned these principles of emotional connection and the process by which you can create it with somebody as you create safety, I applied it to any couple that I worked with. And the results that I saw literally were life-changing. Remember the first couple that I worked with, one of the first couples, they came in after an affair. And the thing that I did was I guided them through the process of being able to work through and come together for him to be vulnerable and to open up and share and to be there for her in a vulnerable way. And after the session finished, they had such a powerful experience in session. I watched them leave the office. They went through the lobby. I remember looking through the door. There was a window in the door. Looking through the door, and I saw them in the courtyard. And he gave her a hug and gave her a kiss and just held her. And I could tell that was a moment they had not had in a long, long time. And all of it was because this process of helping them come together in a different way. Like they weren't fighting and arguing like they were outside of session. They came in session. He was able to be vulnerable and lead out with this emotional presence. And that created safety for her. And so I applied this to other people as well in the addiction realm as I started learning more and more about addiction. This is a fundamental piece. And this is what we know. We know that emotional connection is fundamental to repairing, strengthening, and healing a marriage. There are tons of people who struggle in marriages where there's no safety. As it relates to the addiction and trauma experience, many husbands can be doing good work, really good individual recovery work, but without emotional connection, it can feel like hollow. It can feel like his actions don't generate a feeling of safety. Because there's been partners that I've worked with whose husbands are doing dailies, they're going to group, but they still just don't trust them. They don't feel safe with them. And women who have access to their husband's phone, email, location, like they have all that information, but still they don't trust them. And the piece that they're missing is this idea of connection, this emotional presence, his vulnerability. And without that, you don't get the feeling of safety. He could be doing everything under the sun, but this is why sometimes there's been posts in this group where somebody will say, my husband's been in recovery for X amount of years and we still we're not connecting. And this is, again, this is why I'm so passionate about this topic, is that this emotional connection is like fundamental for relationships to repair. And so there was somebody who posted on here and said, after I'm talking about emotional connection, she said, I don't need my husband to heal. I don't need my marriage in order for me to heal. And that's true. I agree with that. You don't. For couples who do want to stay married and who want to have a fulfilling relationship, a relationship where both people thrive, then emotional connection is absolutely the way to make that happen. And of course, it comes first by creating safety. This is probably the most important slide in this whole deck. Emotional connection hinges on your husband's ability to be vulnerable with you. This idea of vulnerability is crucial because this is what creates a feeling of safety. You can't just jump in. When I talk about emotional connection, again, that's more, if you think about it in that stage 1, stage 2 process, that deep emotional connection that we talked about, that's more stage 2 work, and you cannot get there unless there's safety. And you cannot get safety unless he learns how to be vulnerable with you. And this, again, this sums up everything. This is the process by which you can achieve the kind of connection that you've been wanting. So many wives, again, on this in the very same group, have said, like, I'm desperate for a connection with my husband. He's not there for me, though. He's not present. He's not engaged. He's not vulnerable. And so I can't, there's just so much pain there as a result. What happens, though, in this traditional process, right? Traditionally, that recovery, he goes to his individual therapist and his individual group, she goes to hers. And I'm not saying don't do that. Like, that's individual work. Individual work is fundamental and it's crucial. Sometimes when I talk about connection and the importance of it, people think I'm saying that doing this couples piece is replacing individual work, when it's absolutely not. The thing is difficult. The problem, though, is that traditionally, again, he's focusing on individual work, where he learns about healthy habits, he learns about shame, he gets support from other men, all of which is important. That's good. He needs to learn about that stuff. The problem is that he does not learn how to be vulnerable with you on that path of individual progress and growth. He's learning different things. And so unless he's learning how to be vulnerable with you and creating that muscle memory with you, then he's not learning that skill. So I have an analogy here. So thinking about surfing, one of my favorite places in the world is the beach. I love going to the beach. I love the waves especially. And so this is a very, I think, powerful analogy. If I'm on the sand, if I'm watching somebody surf, and I see, like, okay, I kind of get that's how you do it, right? You take your board out there, when the wave comes, you turn this way, you start to paddle, and you move, and you stand up. Like, I get it. I can read a book about surfing. I can listen to people who know how to surf. I can listen to them talk about surfing. Until I'm in the water and on the surfboard, on the wave, I don't know how to surf. I have not learned the skill of how to surf unless I'm out there getting the experience with it. And I think this is the exact same process when it comes to healing and becoming vulnerable and learning how to create safety. He can be in group and they can talk about, again, most of the time groups focus on individual stuff. I was a facilitator for Lifestar for 18 months, 24 months, and I know the material. There's one book out of the 9. No, there's 10 books. There's 9 or 10. There's one book out of all of those workbooks that have to do with couples. The majority of the focus is on him. And so even if we were to talk about relationship stuff in the group, he's still only talking about it. He's learning about it, but he doesn't have any experience with it. Thus, he doesn't know how to do it. It's not in his nervous system. And so, again, group work can be helpful, and individual work is absolutely necessary for him. But unless he gets the experience with you, interacting with you in a different way, directly with you, he doesn't know how to do it. He knows about it. And Einstein, I love this quote. Again, you get information when you watch people surf. You learn about how to do it. So Einstein said that learning is experience Everything else is just information. And so if he's not getting the experience of being there for you in the moment, and he's not being vulnerable with you, then you're not feeling safe. You're not getting a feeling of safety in the relationship to the degree that you need in order to be emotionally connected, unless he's actively doing that with you. And so, again, this is why people can struggle for a long, long time. This can be a years-long process where there's no safety, even if he's doing good work. And I don't want that for people to experience that. So you might be thinking, yes, emotional connection, this is exactly what I've been wanting. I've been starving for this in my marriage and I haven't had it. So this is what I want. However, I'm totally burned out and tired of being the only one trying for it. Another thing that I'll hear is I can't keep opening up. I can't, you talk about emotional connection and I'm trying to open up. I'm trying to be emotional, but I keep getting hurt because he doesn't respond. How can I connect with him when I feel so betrayed? The most common misconception when I talk about this topic is that emotional connection is not a one-way street, right? That's a common misconception, that it is one-way street. Or in other words, it's the wife endlessly pouring her heart out to her husband whose wall is up, who doesn't know how to receive her emotions, who doesn't know how to be present with her. When partners hear about emotional connection, that oftentimes that's what they envision, and they're tired of that. They're sick and tired of feeling like they're pouring everything out and not getting any response. That's why I'm clarifying this point right now, that that's not at all what I mean when I say emotional connection. The key here is that he is responsible for doing his own emotional work. You can't do that for him. And you know that already, but it's not your responsibility. It's not a one-way street. The primary focus, one of the primary focuses of stage one work in this couples process is teaching and guiding him to be able to create that safety for you and with you. Now, I realize that how much I speak about emotional connection because I know it helps the relationships to heal, and yes, it does help the addiction to heal as well. And I've discovered through your feedback, which is, I'm so grateful, honestly, for your feedback when I'm talking about this, because I'm learning that it's internalized when I say that. When I say emotional connection heals addiction, many women think, okay, I'm not being emotionally connected with him, and he's continuing to act out, therefore it's my fault, and I feel responsible for it. And he's acting out because I'm not connecting, and he's slipping, therefore it's me. Like, I'm at cause here. That feels like gross, right? That feels terrible. And it's so important for me to clarify right now, that's not true at all. That's not what I'm saying. In this form of couples work that I'm describing, the men are responsible to lead out in the process and be vulnerable with you first. If he's not safe, you can't be vulnerable with him. So the process by which he becomes safe is, again, to be vulnerable. Safety is created when he's vulnerable, and it's important for you to know as well that there's things that get in the way of that. I really like this idea, especially this quote, Michelangelo, that's the David. Many of you, I'm sure, know exactly what that is, right? It's this. He carved it in 1507. So what he did was he got this block of marble, and after doing a little bit of reading, I found out that it was flawed marble, and two other sculptors had discarded it. They didn't want to touch it because it was flawed. So what Michelangelo did, he looked at the marble and he said, I saw an angel in the marble, and I carved until I set him free. Right? He could see almost through all the flaws. Okay, that's how I have to do it. I have to carve it in this way. And he had to take this through a sculpting process to create this. This is exactly what happens with this form of couples work. There's a sculpting process that he needs to go through in order to become the man that you need him to be, in order for you to feel safe with him, for you to be able to give him your heart again, because his actions completely betrayed you. And if you're in a relationship where somebody has betrayed you, and if there's abuse in the relationship, there's no way that you can feel safe and trust him unless he becomes this man, the man that you need him to be. So the thing that gets in the way of this, I want to explain this process here. There's these elements of emotion, or in other words, the process of how we experience an emotion and then how that turns into an action. So this idea, this sculpting process connects so well with the recovery process. And it's important that you understand what are the elements of emotion and how is it that he does what he does. And once you understand this, then this analogy becomes even more clear. So at the base level, there's an initial like feeling here underneath the surface that's created, a primary emotion, which are these softer emotions: sadness, fear, lonely, scared, shame, like these underneath the surface feelings that are triggered first when there's an interaction that can spark this up, or something at work, like anything, things just trigger these underneath the surface feelings. Then what happens is these feelings get shifted into above the surface feelings, which are secondary emotions, which are more push away emotions: anger, frustration, resentment, bitterness, like that stuff you see on the surface. And then as a result of these primary emotions turning into higher level feelings, they also turn into actions. The actions in the negative cycle for him consist of like actions of abuse that are terribly destructive. They're not okay. Minimizing, blaming, turning the tables, acting out, being a victim, like all these negative behaviors that just simply traumatize you. And I don't even mean to say simply, like they terribly traumatize the spouse. And he'll continue, and so this re-traumatization thing happens every time he's doing these behaviors. So what happens is he numbs out the pain, right? There's this pain underneath the surface. And this gets converted into more of a frustration, a push away emotion. And then he does one of these things which hurts you. And again, acting out fits into the cycle because he's trying to numb out from this pain because he doesn't know how to manage it. That's a part of what he needs to do. Addiction is all about emotional mismanagement. So when he feels these painful emotions and doesn't know how to deal with them, it comes out sideways, right? Above the surface in a way that hurts you. So another reason why I'm so passionate about this approach, that I think this needs to be started much sooner than most people ever do, is because it's a 2-for-1 benefit. You get 2-for-1 benefits with this. Number one, his vulnerability, when he learns how to tap into this feeling underneath the surface and share it, which is vulnerability, this creates safety for you. I want to share an example. So again, and vulnerability can turn into positive conversations as well. Such a cool example of how there's a couple that I worked with. I walked them through this process. I helped guide him into this place where he could feel his emotions. And this is the beauty of this approach this is what I'm saying. Like, you don't get this in group because you're not there, right? He can be vulnerable with his group, but because you're not there, he's not being vulnerable with you. And as a result, you're not feeling safe. So in the couple session that I work with, when I work with people in this way, I guide him into the feelings of what's going on underneath the surface, right? I can identify all this stuff, then what is going on for you underneath the surface in those moments. And eventually they get to this place. I feel sad. I feel afraid. I feel bad. So it was with this couple that I worked with. I guided them through this process. They went home. He had done it in session. He had taken these feelings, turned to his wife, because I'll tell them this is how the process works. I get them in touch with the feelings, or I work with them to get them in touch. And then I say, good, can you tell your wife that right now? Can you tell her that when you guys get disconnected, can you share with her how sad that place is for you, or how scary it is for you when you feel that distance between you guys, because she matters to you. So what he does was he shares that in a vulnerable way, and then it creates a feeling of safety because she gets a different experience with him in real time. So he goes home, he gets triggered, something happens. Underneath the surface, there's a fear that shows up. And the fear was connected to the relationship, right? The fear of I don't know if we're okay. Are we okay? So and he felt triggered, like he wanted to act out. And so what he said he did was he slowed everything down, tapped into his feelings, because we did it in session. He got that muscle memory. Once he tapped into these feelings, he went to her, and instead of just numbing them out, he managed his emotions in a much more positive way and simply went to her and said, I just feel off right now. I feel afraid. I just want to check in. Where are we? And it led to a very positive conversation because in her mind, they were fine. So she's like, yeah, we're good. We're okay. Don't worry. Everything's fine. But for him to manage his emotions and be vulnerable with her created safety for her to be able to respond. As a result of him being vulnerable and him sharing his emotions in a healthy way, the trigger immediately went away. And that's such a, I can't express to you how important that is for the man to know how to do. When he's triggered, so often people, again, this information is for people who are actively trying to overcome this addiction. They don't want to be acting out. The intensity of these primary emotions can be so overwhelming that their old habits kick in and the numbing out takes place. But when he's guided to be able to share them, be vulnerable, this is the 2-for-1 benefit. Number one, it reduces or eliminates the trigger for him because he's managing his emotions. And so after he shares them, they have a good moment, there's no more pain. Therefore, he doesn't need to numb anymore. So number one, he's able to process his emotions healthily. Number two, he is creating safety in the moment because he's going to her with how he feels. And so it's not a matter of you coming towards him, you pouring your heart out and your soul out when he's not there emotionally. It's a matter of him coming towards you and sharing vulnerably. And again, sometimes when women hear about how he's acting out as a result of his trauma and his shame, which is very often the case, when women hear this, they can get the sense that they need to come towards him and create safety for him or he's going to keep acting out. And if you've gotten that message, then of course you're going to feel responsible for his poor behavior if you don't come towards him, which is again why I want to clarify for you, it is the other way around. And just as powerfully, when he comes to you, like he's able to manage his own emotions and that trigger for him goes away. The question then I would assume that many women would think about is, okay, if he has to learn how to do this process, then does that mean that he needs to learn at my expense? As he's learning, do I need to continue to get traumatized in order for us to make progress? And the answer is a resounding absolutely not. This is why doing this work is so crucial with a therapist who's trained in this process of helping him tap into his feelings and be vulnerable in order to create that safety, which leads to that connection. It's so hard for me to see some of the comments, and my heart goes out to you, and I feel so bad when people say, I went to an EFT session and it was a nightmare. I will never go back, and I'm so leery of it. It's sad because, sure, therapists are trying their best, and without the proper training that you need to address the addiction, to address the trauma, know how to weave the couples piece together. There's so many little intricacies and complexities to this work. You're threading a needle when you're working with couples. However, this is I don't want you to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And we have solid research again that talks about how emotional connection is like the role that it plays in rebuilding marriage. Him learning how to create that safety with you is the way for you guys to get there. He just needs the help and support to learn how to do it, which is again my role. That's my role. He's willing to do it. And as you guys come together, my role, I step in to try to guide them. So in other words, going back to that beach analogy, right? He comes off of the sand, gets into the water with us, with me, and I'm sitting there with him, and I'm holding his board, and I say, listen, when this wave comes, I'm going to tell you when to paddle, and you start paddling. There again, there's more on this analogy, how this plays out, but that coaching piece, that guiding piece is so crucial. And that's the process by which we can create that safety. So how does this work? In session, when I'm working with somebody in these early stages, this is exactly what I do. I'm focusing on helping him get down in touch with these deeper feelings. I ask him questions to guide him into that place. And again, so often they don't know how to identify their feelings. They're so numb to how they feel that if you were to ask them just kind of offhandedly, hey, how you doing today? Oh, I'm fine. Right? You get some surface level answer. But if you know how to ask questions to get in touch with that, and you do, he'll get there. Again, which is this idea of muscle memory. He needs to be guided in the process. He can't just read about it and think yeah, I got to tap into my feelings. Or yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I should connect with my wife. He's learning about it. He's not learning it. So in session, we walk through the process and get him in touch with these feelings. The beauty of this is that, let's see, there's another thing here. Okay, so this is the place where I want to focus on as well. The fear again for the wife is, okay, I'm going to be there. I'm going to show up in that session, and then I'm going to get abused in the moment, and I'm going to get minimized and blamed for something. The beauty of this is that when I'm guiding him in this process, if he ever does pop out, right? If he's underneath the surface for a second and pops out and gets mad at her or starts to blame her, like immediately I'm right there. And I stop that process and I guide him back underneath the surface. Because old habits do pop up, especially at home. In session that can happen, of course, but I'm right there and like I'm so quick to create the safety in the session so you don't continually get traumatized. So he has a space to learn while you're, I can imagine like this, right? I'm working with him over here, like the camera. I'm working with him in this little spot right here. You're over here watching, right? You're just like, okay, I see what's going on. He's getting in touch with his feelings. I didn't really know he felt like that. All I see is him getting angry at me. Like I didn't actually know he felt sad underneath that. So I'm processing with him, processing. So you're hearing this, and then I say, good, you're here. You feel sad. Can you tell her that right now? So in the moment, he turns and says, this is how I feel, kind of like what I described in the last couple slides. He shares vulnerably, which in the moment creates a feeling of safety. The room changes. The temperature in the room changes when he shares in this way. And again, I'm right there and I can interrupt any of these negative things that might show up to teach him how to come down here. And just like my client that I shared a few minutes ago, he's able to take that skill set and he's like, okay, I get it. Like, I get it. It's not like, okay, I think I understand it. He does it. And he's like, this is how we do it. Then you go home and then he tries it. He gets in touch with this piece. And again, it's a process, right? There's not like a magic bullet. This is not by any means a magic bullet, but it's like a personal trainer, right? I'm there. This is how you do that. Go home and try it. That doesn't mean you have to take your wall down, right? You have one good conversation, then the wall comes down. No, this takes time and consistency. But when he's armed with this skill, he's able to create that safety for you and with you as he's learning how to do it. So again, the question that was asked, do I need to detach from him? And let's see. Do you need to detach from him and wait to do this particular form of couples work until he gets healthy so we can actually then have safety and healing conversations? Again, the short answer is no. And the reason why I say no is that when I'm referring again to this particular kind of couples work, I'm suggesting, the thing that I'm saying is that this is the process by which he learns how to be vulnerable with you. So do you need to wait for him to know how to become vulnerable with you until he gets healthy? So let me ask that question again. Do you need to wait for him to learn how to be vulnerable with you until he gets healthy? And so again, I think the answer to that is, how soon do you want him to learn that skill? He develops that skill in the process like I'm describing. It's not traditional couples work. It's not couples therapy as it's known in the community. And that doesn't have a place for addiction and trauma. You've got to use another process. And so by doing it in this way, you don't have to wait because he's learning the skill right then and there while you're safe. You're just watching. And as a result of that, as a result of him learning how to come down here, he becomes healthy in real time. Again, he's not just reading a book and learning about like, oh, okay, healthy people do X, Y, and Z. Unhealthy is this. And do you need to detach and disconnect when he's living here? Sure, yes, protect yourself. I don't want anybody to be harmed. And so as he's learning as he's learning to tap into these deeper emotions, he's becoming healthy with her. And so he's not healthy when he's stuck above the line. That's where re-traumatization continues to happen. And if he lives there throughout most of the week, doing those things. So if he's not doing these things, again, he's healthier. He's healthy in those moments because, again, like I said, this is where he learns how to do that process directly with you. So this is, again, going back to that surfboard analogy. I touched on it for just a second there. I am in session with him, holding the board, as it were, in the water, saying, let's stay right here. Husband, let's stay right here. Or in other words, I see the wave coming. I say, I'm going to tell you when to go. And you start paddling as hard as you can. And then the wave comes, and I say, go, right? Paddle, 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 stand up now. And then he catches the wave and he rides it in like success, right? That's what we're going for. So it is with this session, right? I'm saying, stay here, come underneath the surface. asking him different questions till he gets to the spot where he's feeling these things in the moment, turns and shares, which is healthy, and then he becomes a healthier person as he's creating safety with you. The longer he doesn't know how to be vulnerable and create safety, the more times you're damaged by his above the line behavior, which is devastating. And you need to know, he needs to not only know about, but how to actually create safety ASAP. And this is the fastest way he's going to learn how to do that, is in the moment, in the experience. So going back to this idea, right? Michelangelo sees this sculpture, which is this unpolished, like, what am I going to do with this block? But he takes it through a process, and it becomes the David. Just as these abusive behaviors, minimizing, blaming, acting out, like, that's this unpolished block of, like, that causes damage. Like, what do we do with that? You have to feed it through this process, the healing conversation process, or in other words, him learning how to be vulnerable. It's fed through the process, and this is the result that you get. Like the David, right? He shows up for you as the man that you need him to. He becomes safe. He can be empathetic. He can validate. He can be emotionally present. He can be engaged with you. He can be accountable. Like, he's there. He's with it. Because his old way of responding was fed through the process, is a chiseling away process, which creates something new. Again, the experience of it is the only way to do it. You can't just read about it and become a different person. Like, you have to go through the experience of it. So as this relates to this slide earlier, right, these primary emotions, sad, fear, shame, alone, these deeper level feelings, when he shares, create safety. This is the man that you need. The opposite is also true. When he stays stuck up here, the old reactions, it's this unpolished, like, block of destruction, really, that causes more trauma. So when I talk about what goes where, so this is the video that kind of started this whole thread, which I'm thankful again for your feedback, because I'm able to clarify, I hope, as you're listening to this. When I talk about couples therapy and EFT, this is, again, specifically, I'm referring to this stage 1 process. And of course, stage 2, this fits into the same, like, but initially when I'm referring to it, it's stage 1. I'm working with him to create vulnerability and safety. That helps to heal the addiction. That helps to heal your trauma when he's safe. That improves his self-worth. That strengthens a marriage, and it leads to that connection, and it reshapes our brain. You're literally creating new neural pathways in the moment. And so you've got this base of positive, good stuff that you're doing. Like I said, EFT, you're doing breakthrough sessions, ideally, right? Healthy habits, you can do neurofeedback, you can do EMDR, you can do, there's lots of different pieces. And there's other things that I didn't even list on here. These are some of my favorites, though. But this couples therapy piece is not, so this is, again, where I think people get stuck. When I talk about doing EFT or this particular form of couples work, or in other words, again, teaching him how to be vulnerable, the therapist teaching him, not you, the therapist teaching him, sometimes they think, when I say do this couple stuff early, they think, no, not doing that, because he needs to do his individual stuff. And yes, that's true. And this is not what the recovery process looks like. When I say this, right, when I'm showing you this does not mean this. This is not, okay, do EFT for the first 6 months and neglect everything else. Don't do individual stuff. Don't do group. It's not what I'm saying. It's not do EFT 6 months, then do your group 6 months, then do individual therapy 6 months, and do. It's not that process. What it more looks like is this. Recovery is not linear. He needs to be doing solid recovery work, individual work, absolutely, from the beginning. And in tandem with that, him learning how to treat you differently is not only, is such a crucial piece if he and you both want the relationship to heal. I think that's another foundational piece to good recovery work that should be a part of his dailies. That should be a part of his daily life, him learning how to and creating safety for you. So it's all of these things woven together. I should add couple stuff here in this way, woven together, that creates a solid and lasting recovery. This is oftentimes what happens. I think, to be completely honest, I think it's a mistake to not integrate what we've been talking about earlier. And the reason why is because sometimes people say, I need to wait 12 to 18 months until he's safe or until he's healthy for us to start to work on the couples piece. Again, to be super clear, you're not in the beginning trying to save the marriage necessarily. Some people come in and that's their goal, and that's fine. But the goal isn't like, I got to save my marriage And the wife says, well, I got to open up then. I got to be open and I got to pour myself. We're not doing that. If somebody were to wait 12 to 18 months without him learning how to be vulnerable and without him creating safety for you, you will be continually re-traumatized. Not because he wants to. He needs to learn that skill, and that's not an excuse or permission for him to just like, well, that's too bad. Like, I'm trying my best and you're feeling terrible, but oh well, like I'm trying. Not okay. Therefore, he needs to learn this skill and not wait 18 months to do it. Stage 2 is where we create these deep connections. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking get into this couples process so he learns how to treat you differently in real time so he has the capacity to be able to replicate that day in, day out on command when you're at home. So that doesn't mean, again, you go to couples work and then you don't do any individual therapy. Like this is woven together in the best case scenario, in my opinion. And so I'm talking about these fundamentals of creating safety. So often people wait this long and then they do this couples piece. But again, they're not actually even doing this type of couples work. They're like, in their mind, I got to save the marriage now. Like, we've been doing this for so long. He's sober. I guess we can try. I don't feel all that safe. So let's do some marriage work. So again, it's different. He needs this process of the couples work. Like I said, him becoming vulnerable. This is what I envision this as. You take this couples piece, like I said, pretend that's added here, or just like imagine that. That is woven throughout the whole process where he is learning how to be vulnerable and creating safety with you while these 12 and 18 months are going on, while he's doing individual work. And so you're not neglecting any of these other pieces and replacing it with couples work. Like, this is a piece that, like I said, weaves and ties everything together. He needs to be spending time creating safety in the marriage directly with you. Him working a solid recovery program is part of how you know he's invested in change. That's a part of how you know, okay, he is trying to create safety for me because he's doing his individual work. That's important. That's necessary. That helps then create a sense of safety and security, but without that emotional underpinning, that vulnerability, it's often not enough. So this is why I'm so zealously committed. I don't know anybody else who's as passionate about this because of how I've seen it play out in the lives of the couples that I work with. So often, again, there's this misunderstanding about what EFT is. There's these, sometimes there are big name people who present and talk about EFT is not the way to go. They're not trained in EFT. They don't know what I'm explaining to you right now. Like, I'm referring to stage 1 work, creating safety and vulnerability. And so I'm so committed to promoting this because I know how it helps, and I want you to get help, and I want you to heal. I want the relationship to heal. The goal is safety, right? The goal is safety. That's like the early goal, right? He still has to walk the miles, but I want you to save time. There's no shortcut. When I talk about how this couples process speeds up the process, there's no shortcut, right? You're still he's got to put in the miles. It's not that there's this secret trap door where he gets to escape his responsibilities because he's doing this couple stuff. It's not it at all. He's got to be doing his individual work, but without doing this vulnerability process, individual work, plus learning how to be vulnerable with you. He's spending all this time, right? 12 to 18 months wandering around until he finally starts to begin to create safety. But if you want to expedite that process, again, it's not a shortcut. He's putting in the miles still, but it's a direct route to creating safety when you weave everything together. So the last last point really that I want to make here is that the number one factor that determines whether or not you can apply this approach is if he's willing to do it, if he's willing to do this recovery work. So when I say it, again, if he's willing to recover and wants to get rid of the addiction. I sometimes meet men who are not willing to do it. They're in marriages, they act out, and they don't care. They're not willing to try. They don't want to go to therapy. They won't do any individual work. This won't work. This won't work for that. The number one factor is he willing to do this work? Does he see that there's a problem? Does he want to change? Again, he doesn't have to be perfect he doesn't have to be perfect or perfectly consistent in all of his recovery efforts. But if his heart is there and he's like, I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want to keep falling short. I don't want to keep fighting. I don't want to keep acting out. He needs help to get in tune with what's underneath the surface. Again, the last piece here, just to reemphasize, he is the one who leads out. He is the one who starts to tap into his feelings And with a therapist who knows what they're doing, there's safety in the session. And so he can learn how to process these feelings, share them with you. And the beauty, again, is that you don't even have to do anything with his emotions as he's sharing them, especially in these early stages, right? You don't have to do anything. Because if you were expected to then like jump in and immediately comfort him and like, oh, you're not a bad guy. Oh, you feel shame because you acted out. Like, oh, you're not a bad guy. I can see you're trying. Like, you don't have to do any of that. It's this early process is him learning how to do this. You don't have to bring the wall down quite yet. You're there in session watching. You're watching him create safety with you in the moment. And then you can decide how you want to respond to that. You might feel like, okay, one conversation. Okay, what does that mean? Right? Then he goes back. Then he has another conversation. Then it feels like, okay. And then he goes home and he starts to do this more. He applies this process. He's sharing. He's open. He's vulnerable. He's consistent. And then you might think like, okay, I'm starting to feel safe. Maybe I can bring this wall down a brick. And maybe I can start to see how this progresses, right? And he keeps working. So there's no pressure for you to like immediately jump in. That was one of the comments that I saw. It wasn't EFT, I think it was PACT that one of the ladies went through, and she felt pressured to immediately get in and comfort him and be there for him. It's not what we're doing here. He leads out in the process. You can choose how you respond until you feel safe. And once he gets underneath these destructive behaviors that you're used to seeing at home, like everything changes. I'm so passionate about this because I've seen this work time in, time out with couples across the board in every stage of this process. The question is, one of the questions that started this whole thing off is, should I go in right after D-Day? And somebody, I think it was Tracy, posted and said like, that would have been a mistake for me to go in right after D-Day. I wish I would have taken, I don't know if she said I wish I would have or she did. I think she said I wish I would have taken like 1 or 2 weeks to clear my head, center myself, figure out what is going on, how do I proceed, and then move forward, right? I think it's an awesome approach, right? You don't have to go in the day after D-Day and figure out like, how do I save my marriage? What we're doing is we want to ground ourselves, feel centered, first assess, is he willing to do the work? If he is, great, let's get going. Start his individual process. Start doing dailies. And I hope, again, as we've done this, like as I've shared in this way, in this video, starting that process where he's learning how to be vulnerable with you in a session, so he can wire in those responses muscle memory, so he can call upon that in the moments that he feels overwhelmed. And he's able to know what to do with these feelings to consistently create safety for you. So I hope it was helpful. Please, I'd love to hear your comments, questions. Does this clarify some of the misunderstandings that you might have had as I talk about couples work? I need to do a better job explaining this on the outset. So again, I'm grateful for the feedback. I hope this helps. I know that healing is possible. I absolutely, I've seen it. I know couples recover. I know individuals heal. And this process, again, why I'm so obsessed with it is because I've seen it work so quickly to help create a foundation of safety. And once you have safety, everything changes. Our trauma is reduced. The intensity of triggers is reduced. The frequency of triggers is reduced when there's safety and connection. And so I just want to set you guys up for the most success as quickly as possible, without, of course, taking these shortcuts where you're leaving pieces out, but not having to spend 5 years in this process and still not have him be sober and still not have him know how to create safety. Like, all this stuff is woven together to create the optimal level of success in the shortest amount of time possible. So again, I hope this is helpful. Thank you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. Thanks a lot.